Piers Morgan, it's said by those who know him, is actually quite a nice chap. People who know Katie Hopkins tell me the same thing. This should be a relief. But actually it points towards a depressing feature of the modern media. Rather than seek truth and serve their viewers and listeners by shining a light on real issues, broadcasters like Hopkins and Morgan have very different agendas. Their agenda is cynical and self-serving. It's no more sophisticated than maximising the exposure that they personally achieve in the various media and social media forums that feed their egos and bank balances. In the world of celebrity gossip and tabloid news, this is what pays their bills and extends their shelf lives. In the process, journalism is tarnished and the public misinformed, led by the nose in whatever direction these professional self-publicists deem advantageous to them. My own recent encounter with the phenomenon took place on ITV in mid-April this year. I was invited to join Piers Morgan on the sofa at Good Morning Britain, ostensibly to discuss hunting and conservation issues. The context was set by some comments Prince William had made regarding hunting a few weeks earlier. Now he was in India visiting a rhino reserve, and the question was being asked, can Prince William be a conservationist and in favour of hunting? There appeared to be a paradox, and they wanted someone to explain it. At least that's how it was pitched to me. The lead-in was straightforward. The old mantra, prepare for the worst and hope for the best, usually serves me well, so I made sure I was ready for a grilling. Facts and figures memorised, the issues covered from both sides of the debate, and a bit of a refresher on Morgan's rather checkered career history, just in case. Arriving at the studios ready for a quick bit of makeup and for a microphone to be attached to my jacket, a very nice young woman popped in to tell me Piers would be asking me what the difference was between hunting and poaching, how I thought hunting helped conservation, and what my friends thought of my hobby. Nothing to worry about, she smiled. However, media professionals I know briefed me rather more realistically. Piers Morgan's looking for a trophy, and it's your head he wants, said one veteran broadcaster. He'll try and bully you and make you look stupid, she went on. He's not interested in the truth. He's only interested in point scoring and raising his profile with his audience. There I was, therefore, fairly well warned that the cosy chat might not be all that cosy when the cameras rolled. I took my place on the sofa at 8:10, told to expect 3 minutes of chat. Leading into my slot, the report from India was playing, the correspondent telling viewers that the rhino reserve took a hard line on poachers, even shooting them on occasion. Morgan's co-presenter, Susanna Reid, started the questions by asking if I knew about that and if it was justified or effective. This gave me a chance to confirm the shoot-on-sight policy in many game reserves and add that there was a real problem, with international Chinese and Vietnamese criminal gangs taking advantage of the corruption that runs through most African governments to finance their activities. Poaching was the real issue, not trophy hunting. I needed to make this clear, but Piers Morgan was quick to jump in with a diatribe about how repulsed he was by trophy hunters. He referred to corpulent American tycoons and was clearly set on continuing an inflammatory and hyperbolic monologue. I suggested his approach was typically tabloid and that the issue was one that deserved to be treated with more seriousness, and this clearly upset Morgan, who took me to task, saying that many people held its views, but I was able to respond that people who held these views were uninformed, and went on to explain that in areas managed for hunting, wildlife proliferated. The thrust of the argument Morgan made throughout the interview was that he objected to the taking of photographs by trophy hunters and hanging severed heads on the wall, as he put it. I suggested at one point that he didn't really object to hunting, more to photography. During the interview, Morgan repeated his colourful and misleading descriptions of hunting. Blasting rhinos with howitzers was one of his more obviously ridiculous claims, so much so that I had to ask him at one point if he'd done any research at all. The tone of the interview was bombastic. He clearly had no wish to hear any counter-argument. What he wanted was someone to sit on the sofa to berate for the amusement of the pre-Jeremy Kyle slot. Well, I wasn't about to act as his patsy, and the two of us butted heads for close to 7 minutes before Susanna Reid insisted on separating these two big beasts, as she said it, for the sake of programming. We ended on a handshake, and I'm sure Morgan was pleased with the publicity. The great unwashed duly twittered in with a plethora of uninformed bigotry about hunters and hunting. As Piers had planned, few would have learned that Prince William's serious point about conservation and hunting being linked had any merit. What they got was Morgan confirming their prejudices and promoting his own narrative that all big game hunters are greedy, fat American tycoons. Quite why he kept using these divisive but irrelevant adjectives was lost on some post-interview commentators. Would he be happier if more hunters were skinny Italian bus drivers? Said one. The backlash after the interview was an interesting and rather depressing indication of how stories move in the modern media and the power to do damage that the apparently vacuous commentators like Morgan and Hopkins have. The Mail Online wrote up predictably pro-Morgan spin on this. Well, he is their boy these days. The Express, the sister newspaper, likewise. Huffington Post was a little bit more balanced. Of course, I got death threats and threats of violence, as well as the usual abusive calls and texts. Morgan has form when it comes to incitement. Writing for the Mail Online, he once called for violence to be used against the hunter who shot a lion in Zimbabwe, celebrated in the press as Cecil, and much paraded as a poster boy for the anti-hunting lobby in 2015. The man concerned, actually, a Dr. Palmer, who's a dentist from the United States, was never charged with any crime. The Zimbabwe authorities said all his papers were in order, and he's welcome to visit Zimbabwe any time. Morgan, uninterested in facts as he is, was unperturbed. He wrote, "I'd like to introduce a new sport. Big human hunting. I'll sell tickets for $50,000 to anyone who wants to come with me and track down fat, greedy, selfish, murderous businessmen like Dr. Palmer in their natural habitat. We'd lure him out with a bait. In his case, I suggest the fresh blood of one of his victims would be very effective, as it seems to turn him on so much. And once lured, we could all take a bow and arrow and fire a few arrows into his limbs to render him incapable of movement. Then we'd calmly walk over, skin him alive, cut his head from his neck, and take a bunch of photos of us all grinning inanely at his quivering flesh." Is that an incitement to violence? You be the judge. At least one police officer I discussed it with thought so. Perhaps it was all a bit of a Piers joke. He wasn't serious. Really? I don't think it reads funny. It's penned to rouse the rabble, and rabble-rousing is a dangerous business when it comes to animal rights fanatics. In their various guises, they're known to attack homes, people, and businesses without quarter. When conservation needs serious journalists looking at all possible solutions to the impending extinction of numerous populations of endangered animals, all the mainstream can offer is a lowbrow, closed-minded and self-satisfied mewling of people who've never studied the subject, never been in a hunting camp, people who really have nothing to offer in terms of expertise. Yet these are the opinion formers. They're making personal fortunes out of their media careers, but their financial betterment comes at the price of binding people, or blinding people, to the real issues and silencing the nuanced, grown-up conversations that we need to have if we're going to save our wildlife. Morgan took unkindly to being called tabloid and sensationalist during our interview, but had John Humphreys been the interviewer, would he have been shouting and ranting with inaccurate invective and emotional rhetoric as Morgan did? I leave viewers to draw their own conclusions. I salute Prince William for having the courage to bring to the media's attention the reality that properly managed hunting concessions work for wildlife proliferation, regardless of the squeamishness many have for the idea of shooting large animals for sport. We need to move the conversation on from the personal distaste of casual commentators and seek the heart of the matter. Hunting conservationists have these conversations among the friends, but they're preaching to the choir, admittedly doing much good work on the ground, but the message needs to be debated in mainstream media programming with serious, informed debate. The public is hugely misinformed and led by an emotional narrative rather than a fact-based, solution-orientated one. There were 120 million Africans in 1900. There are 1.2 billion now, and there will be 2.4 billion in 2050. Human-animal conflict is rising sharply. Africans see wild animals as dangerous or a nuisance. If they're to preserve them and their habitat, they have to value them. Hunting money provides some of that value. It's not the only solution, it's one of many. We're running out of time, while populist, cynical fools like Hopkins and Morgan act as gatekeepers to public opinion. It's time for this to change.